Yeah, so welcome to this little video series on stress and the importance of emotional control. So, what is stress? It's really when your mind perceives that you are unable to handle the tasks set in front of you, the situation, the circumstance. There's an inability there, whether it's a skill gap. Whether you're ill prepared, it could be financially, maybe emotionally resilient enough, with enough capacity. It could be cognitively. Perhaps there's skills that you don't have or have sufficient of to address the problem at hand. And when there's that gap, when there's that when the brain recognizes, and we'll use the brain, but also it's synonymous with yourself. But maybe you acknowledge it and you're aware of it, or maybe not. But when the brain sees that there's this gap in your ability to address the situation in a way that's satisfactory to you, that's when we can begin to feel quite stressed out. So it could be a conflict at work with a coworker, a conflict at home. It can be chronic or short term in nature. It could be someone cutting you off in traffic, or butting in line at the Costco, and a flash of emotion and quite short term. Or it can be chronic, where every single day when your child comes home from school, they're crying because they're getting bullied, and you've consulted their teacher or the principal, or you've escalated things, but it's still happening, and there's no remedy to it, it seems. And you might be at work thinking about, I have to pick my kid up today, and are they going to be very upset again? These are very real fears, and things to be stressed out about. In the short term example, some of those might be a little less reasonable to have an insane outburst. It might be easier to have emotional control if someone cuts you off in traffic, and a quick thought or a quick muttering under your breath of, frig that person. That person's not treating people how I want to treat other people. But sometimes these short-term things that stress us out too can become chronic in time, or can just be really detrimental. It might be something short-term, like maybe you need to put gas in your car, and this doesn't happen too often, but the gas stations are out of gas. Maybe there's a gas run or something. That's a bit of a poor example. Maybe something short term might be, I love plants. Maybe a plant is very dehydrated, but I know that I'm not going to be able to get to my office here and water them for the weekend, or a few hours. Maybe I'm booked up and I don't have the time to water them in between sessions or something like this. And it's more short term in nature, without very lasting. Well, potentially, if my plant dies, that's some lasting effects, certainly. But when these things are kind of consuming you, and well, I suppose, though, in the example with the plant, like, I do have the ability to water it. Maybe there's a water outage here in the building, though, and okay, how am I going to lug enough water to this office from my house to water these plants, perhaps? But without getting too much into the weeds, though, of these kind of make-believe and very real examples at times. Again, when there's that gap in between your perception about what you can do to influence or remedy the situation and the current situation, that's when we can get quite stressed. And this is where the concept of emotional control comes in. It would do limited help, and even potentially be self-defeating, for me to cancel my clients that are coming in so I have time to water my plants. I have the plants here to make a good environment for my clients, or more, a warmer environment. It's a bit more homely. It's, brings some literal life into the room. Clients can watch these things grow, and kind of as they come over a period of weeks and months, they can see some change in the very office itself that they're hoping to see some change in themselves. But when emotional control, like without it, if I start canceling appointments to water plants, or I'm so caught up in it that when I'm engaged in discussion with somebody, that I'm unable to separate that thought and distance myself from it a bit. And kind of be in the here and now, and I'm thinking of the there and then. It can get in the way and cause, it causes the stress to last longer than it necessarily has to, at a potential intensity that's harsher or more fierce than it necessarily needs to be. And so emotional control would be me saying, okay, I have neglected my plants too much. And this is a kind of a short-term example. I've neglected them too much, perhaps, and I've gotten into this situation where now it's a bit dire. They're looking very wilty. But I have people to see. I need to table these emotions. I'm kind of afraid that these plants might be harmed. I need to table that for now and think constructively about what can I do about this. Can I, in the 10 minutes between clients, 10 or 15 minutes, can I, rather than write the note right then, can I table it for later in the day and go quickly water them? I begin to distance myself from this. And again, this is a short-term example, so it's not super pressing or dramatic. But let's go to the one where there's a parent, and they know that every single day their child is coming home very upset at school, and they've tried a few things so far. They've tried consoling them, perhaps, getting them a treat every time there's a treat ready for them in the car. Maybe they haven't talked to their teacher yet. Maybe they have, but they haven't escalated it to the principal yet. Have they tried talking to this particular bully's parents yet? Maybe one of these has been done, but there's still a few options. But when some of these chronic stressors are in our lives, getting caught up on it, and perhaps, if the parent's spending, significant times in the morning, and it's a noble cause. I'm not saying this to degrade it or discount this at all, but if they're spending significant time every single morning, kind of pumping their kid up, oh, today's going to be a good day, hold your head up high. They can say these things about you, but that doesn't make them true. Spending their whole morning, and now they're rushed to get to work. Maybe they're getting to work late some days because their child's really, really upset. And then they're at work scrambling to get things done. Their work performance might be lessened. They might be spending time at work thinking, okay, I've tried everything in my power to do this, but I can't bear the thought of seeing them crying again, or going to bed crying again, or what have you, and kind of taking away from my time in the evening to relax after my own work day. And there are there's sacrifices of being a parent, certainly. But then, again, it all comes into these with counseling, with any negative emotion people feel. That's just something I've touched on in other videos. There's negative emotions that humans feel. But there are, oh my goodness, what's the word? There are healthy negative emotions, and there are unhealthy negative emotions. And the unhealthy ones are the ones that I'm talking about now. So being so stressed at work about seeing your kid and hardly able to bear it, and even the thought of that, it kind of consumes your mind, and you're not able to focus for maybe 15 minutes of every hour at work. You're tossing and turning in bed at night, thinking of what can I do next, and kind of just spiraling. It's not really like those thoughts get a bit stuck because there's such a strong, unhealthy, negative emotion of stress, fear of their future. Their maybe your expectations even could come into it. That I expected my kid to be easygoing and not such a hassle all the time. And geez, it's just turned out to be a lot of work being a parent. Who knows what could be going on there? But what we're really talking about is it's not just a healthy amount of worry; it's an unhealthy amount of fear and panic. Maybe strong sadness, even going into hopelessness. Kind of consuming you. And the definition that we're going to go with, like we do with almost all of these unhealthy negative emotions, is if the intensity of it, so the strength, so panic versus worry, hopelessness versus sadness, anger versus frustration. When you're experiencing these at an intensity, so a strength, a frequency, so multiple times a day perhaps, or multiple times a week, or duration, so once those thoughts come in, it's not, they're lasting for minutes and minutes and even hours at times. It's hard to shake them off. They're very sticky. And that's the nature of the emotions that we're talking about. These unhealthy emotions that have one or more of these traits about them, and so that's when emotional control comes in. And so being able to create some distance and to bring a strong sense of anger and hatred towards the bully of your child to a level of frustration. It's not that you're capitulating and saying that this bully has the right as an individual to have free expression however they choose to exert that right, which may also be true, but it can be very frustrating that person's choosing to be so rude or crude to your child and to other childs most likely as well. Like stewing in this anger and hatred just takes away from your quality of life, from your ability to think rationally and clearly about, okay, what things can I do that are productive, that will be self-helping in this situation, rather, because stewing on it and thinking it and feeling these emotions don't necessarily do anything. Like, what behaviors or acts or thoughts can I do, or can I help instill in my child to help with the situation? So that's where we get into this exercise. There's some ways to help with this stress. And one of those ways is, when a person's stressed, they can go down several rabbit holes, and there's often a negative tilt towards them, and it's very natural. The brain is a predictive machine. It's one of the great powers of humanity is to be able to forecast out into the future, but we also have a negative bias where, and I believe it's Jordan Peterson said this. I don't know if he was quoting somebody or what, but it was we have this negativity bias because we can always be very afraid of a bear in the woods and take a bunch of precautions to lessen the risk of there being a bear or being victim and food for the bear. But we can only be so happy, and one results in death, the other one results in extraordinary happiness. And so by that nature of humanity and species in general, we have a negative bias to approach things with some skepticism and always be always looking for the negative. So with that, plus our amazing human forecasting abilities, we can create a series of rabbit holes or diversions or abstractions from reality. And that's really when we begin to get quagmired and stuck a little bit in some of these unhealthy negative emotions at times. So to help combat this, there's an exercise. It's called Seeing the Trees Through the Forest. And what it entails is decreasing your context window. If you're a parent, and we'll just keep going with this one, but it applies to really most, if not all, examples where someone's forecasting out into the negative. When this is happening and you're going 2 and 3, 4, 5, 6 abstractions away in these thought rabbit holes, my kid's getting bullied. What's that going to do to his self-esteem? Long term, he or she, what have you, are they going to have struggle being confident in life? I've just read a news article the other day that said self-esteem and having a good image of oneself is so important for almost every aspect of life. Okay, if they're losing their confidence in this formative years of their childhood, how's that going to affect their ability to leave the nest at 18 or 20 and pursue some of their passions? Are they going to be always doubting themselves? Are they going to be able to trust other people? If those things are true, are they ever going to find a romantic partner? Are they going to strive and reach their full potential? The mind can have a way of going down these things and kind of get caught up. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying that these types of thoughts are intruding at an intensity, frequency, or duration that are disturbing you and taking up a lot of time and mental energy. And so what this exercise is, though, this trees through the forest, and like you could see those thoughts, they're not the immediate. They're geared towards forecasting out for the next several years and several years, even decades at times. But with all things, with all predictive, with computers in our brains and such, maybe there's an error of confidence where we're looking at this thing where, okay, maybe if this bully degrades my child's confidence by so much, then this will happen. Then, maybe there's a 20, maybe we can be pretty confident there'll be a confidence hit. Let's say we're 50% confident. And it's like, okay, well, how long is that going to last? I think it's going to last his entire life, or for the next, until he leaves public education. Well, are we really that confident on that? So now, maybe we're 25% confident. And then, as these things go down, we're getting into these abstractions where we're forecasting out on things that are a percentage of a percentage of a percentage, and creating a reality that's quite negative but feels very real. And we can see it being real. Like, these are real fears. But getting back to what I was saying with the trees in the forest is, in that situation, your child's life and their life in public school, or their career aspirations and aspirations out of life decades into the future, would be the forest. And that can be very overwhelming. It's a whole human life you're talking about and you're thinking about. But what this exercise is geared at is, rather than looking at the full forest, rather than looking at this magnitude of abstractions from reality, start to look at the trees. What is happening right now? My child is being bullied at school on a daily basis. And this is where the tree comes in. What can I do that's self-helping, that's productive, that's grounded in today's reality and rational thought, maybe a bit of creativity in there? What can I do in the next week? But really what you're looking for is something that, like a context window, that it might be slightly overwhelming and slightly stressful, but it is not everything about that child's life or everything all at once kind of coming in. It's okay. What what can I do for the next week or in the next month? Wherever that context window falls, where at the end of that period, that's kind of when it starts to get very, there's too many abstractions happening. It's very overwhelming. So whether that's a month or this semester or the next week, the day, um, that afternoon, what have you, focusing on that rather than these abstractions can free the mind from everything all at once and focusing on the here and now. And with that, you might be able to gain a bit of mental freedom from everything that's going on over there and to the here and now. And with that freeing, you might be able to free up some mental energy, some increase your stamina, increase some of the emotional regulation. That you might not have the emotion of intense fear of a decade of your child suffering in the span of what am I going to do for my child in the next week. That fear might not exist there so much as the fear of, okay, is it going to happen by the end of this week, or is it going to be dealt with at the end of this week? One fear seems a little smaller than the other, to me personally anyway, and that's kind of what this exercise is geared at. And so that's really the essence of it. As always with these videos, I will ramble on and go down my own little thought rabbit holes, and so thank you for bearing with me on this one. I will always be appreciative of anybody that's willing to listen. But with this forest of the trees, it's when you're facing stress and most of the example we used today was rather chronic and long-term in nature, but it can apply to short-term stressors as well. And you never know with some of these chronic things, when we begin to focus intently on them, and as I just said, when we focus intently on them, rather than spreading out all that mental energy over months and years, if we focus that on a week or a month at a time, it can sometimes have much more productive results. If in that example, if maybe you have reached out to the teacher and the teacher emailed you back saying they spoke to that individual, they maybe even 2 or 3 times, but still nothing's being done. Is my next option consulting the principal? Do I inform the teacher first before I do that, or do I just go right to the principal? What happens then? But see, then some of these thoughts can begin to run away. Okay, well, what if the principal does nothing? What if I take it to the school board and the school board does nothing? But again, focusing on the here and now. Okay, this week I will email the teacher and I will inform them that if my child comes home again on Friday after a week of suffering, I will be consulting with the principal. And that's that week, and that's my focus for this week. I'm not thinking about what the principal may or may not say or may not do. I'm not thinking about the emotional development of my child for the next decade in public school. I'm thinking about this week, and it can spare you from some of these thoughts that our imagination and ability to forecast is again one of our greatest strengths, but also can cause quite a lot of undue suffering, especially things that haven't happened yet, even if they may be likely. And so that's what this exercise is geared at, is giving your brain a little bit of a break, breaking things down. If you got benefit from this exercise or need, I think I explained it fairly well. But if not, let me know down in the comments, and if you got benefit from it, then that'll just make my day. That's I hope to have increased your quality of life or someone in your life's quality of life just that little bit. And now, kind of a little caveat before I end things off, though. It's not always easy doing this, though. It's simple. Like in the words of Albert Ellis, it's simple, but it's not easy to get the mind to, especially if you've been somewhat trained or conditioned to do this type of forecasting and thinking, it's not always easy necessarily to say, okay, I'm not thinking about that. I'm going to just think about what I can do this week or this day to help my child or to help address this. But it's like anything though, with training, there's going to be some failures and setbacks. There's going to be points along that path where, yeah, geez, I did so good for a few days at just thinking about the week, but then, some new information came to light, and I'm right back to, maybe the bully did something really egregious and really harmed your child emotionally, maybe even physically, and geez, like that, you're thinking, I could see that scarring them for a long time. It's like, well, that very well may be true, but how is focusing on that really going to be helpful right now? Again, like training your mind to come back to this period of time where you feel comfortable, maybe a little uncomfortable, but more so confident that you can use your full mental faculties to the fullest during that window of time and focus in on trying to find a solution or a remedy in some way. But it's not going to be an immediate thing after watching this video where you're able to just to kind of create that line in the sand or that wall where past a week you're not going to think about stressors in that specific context of your child going to school and bullies and such. It's going to take time, and part of it is noticing it. So when you're at work or out at the bars Friday, or whatever you do for fun or for hobbies, and you catch yourself again thinking, oh, okay, geez, like you're at hockey and you're on the bench and you're thinking, geez, like, oh, like what am I going to do here? What am I going to do here? It's going to do this XYZ to my child as time moves forward. It's noticing it and then saying to yourself, okay, I've noticed it, noted. What can I do this week? Maybe one of your focuses is I will still enjoy my hobbies to give my brain some of the relaxation it needs so I have the energy to combat this tomorrow. That might be a very productive and realistic stance to take, where you have to protect your own mental health so you can help that of your child's. But yeah, it's not going to be necessarily easy, but even though as simple as this sounds, to some anyway. But with that, I think I'm going to start just rambling on if I keep going here. But yeah, no, throw it in the comments if you have any questions, and I'll do my best to address them. Thank you.